Hello, welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Laureen. We're here up at the camp in Nova Scotia, and it's a windy day, as you can probably hear. So I can't do anything about that. I hope I hope you don't mind. It's one of those days where if I put we've got some vinyl there that we can put up to try and block either the rain or the wind. But if I block the wind, then it's just really, really humid and still, that kind of still, well, I don't know if you get it, that kind of still where I just feel hard to breathe. So I tend to overcompensate by too much wind, and I really don't mind it. So some pretty good books I've been reading while I've been here. A couple that are still at home I've managed to read at just the end of July, so those will have to wait for a while. But what did I start with? Okay. I think last video I mentioned the prequel to this series. What was it called? It's in here. A Season for Spies, and it takes place at the beginning of World War II in England. With the main character is Lane Winslow, and this is the actual book one in the series, A Killers in King's Cove, and it is written by Iona Whishaw. Now I'm going to spell that for you. Iona and Whishaw. So yeah, it's much thicker than the other one. The other one I took about, I don't know, just a couple hours to read. It was under 200 pages, I'm pretty sure. It was okay. I enjoyed it. I recommended it to Steve, said it's a fairly tight spy story novella kind of thing, and if you're just looking for a straight ahead, no problems attached story, the first one is good to read. This one I didn't like quite as much. I liked the premise. I still like the character. I still like the setting, because it's come to Canada, set in the BC, in near Nelson, which is in the mountains. If you're coming at it from the what's it called? Alberta? Yeah, Alberta. Then you kind of go down towards the border and then go up. And am I telling a lie? Oh, it's so possible. Anyways, it's in that sort of mountain thing that is currently getting in the neighborhood of a lot of the fires that are going on. But actually, I really liked Nelson. We were there. It's got an amazing co-op, and the town is just, it's that kind of town feeling that we used to associate with communities where there's main streets and side streets, and they all have some kind of business to them, and then the homes kind of set out from there, but it doesn't really get all suburby. Now, we didn't really look on the outskirts, but the thing about mountains is you can't really go too far before you butt into something you can't build around. So I really liked Nelson, and I remember my sister saying once that if she had to relocate in British Columbia, that Nelson would be one of the places she would consider. So this is taking place after World War II. So we're in sort of kind of summer of 1946, and our protagonist Lane has moved to BC. She wants to get as far away from the people and the events that happened during the war that she was responsible for. Certain spying activities, certain, not code breaking, but code carrying. So she was a behind the lines kind of spy. She has affinity in German and Russian and French, I suspect. So she's more of a linguist than she is a spy, but because of her different languages, she can she's fluent enough that she can pass. So that was her story. She didn't love what she was doing. It was pretty harrowing. I think she had a lot of kind of I think she saw some pretty tough stuff, but I think it was more about her own personal traumas. But we don't get into it, which is kind of nice. So we come to British Columbia. She's bought this beautiful piece of property that has a lovely view. Speaking of lovely views, that's a marsh back there. It's high tide. Looks really different at low tide. Very brown and stinky. So we love high tide. Anyhow, She's moved into a small community called Kings Cove. There's about 20 some odd people that have been living there for ages and ages. And nobody particularly was involved in World War II as soldiers, except several were involved in World War I and are now of an age where they wouldn't have gone to World War II, but they're still sort of suffering the traumas from their wars. And someone gets killed. She just moves in, someone gets killed, and she's the fall guy because she's the stranger. And all these clues kind of keep happening on her property. So there's all this circumstantial evidence, and as the reader, you're pretty sure nothing happened because, well, like, why would you make all that effort to travel to British Columbia across from England and, like, yada yada, to just kill somebody and then report it? I mean, British Columbia is big enough and there's enough bears, you could get away with it for quite a while. So she starts to try and defend herself with the local police force, which are RCMPs. And she becomes embroiled in the investigation. The setting is pretty cool. It really facilitates what's happening with the murder and the placing of the clues and so on. It's a much denser kind of a forest than what you see behind me, and the people are pretty insular in their way, but they're also so glad to have someone new in their midst that they're also very friendly. But of course, there's 40, 50 years worth of community stories and secrets and so forth that they haven't shared with her. So she's kind of diving in a little bit harshly in a way. I mean, these things generally tend to arise over time, but because she's trying to prove her innocence, she's digging a little deep, a little hard. So there's a lot of interconnected threads amongst the community, and there's a couple of very well kept secrets. Although when people start to put the pieces together, things happened that they just didn't really stop and think about, because there was a huge fire in 1919 which affected just about everybody in this community and the whole Nelson area and so on. British Columbia doesn't get little fires, they get pretty big ones. So you put all those pieces together and you've got a really good book. Now, this author does one thing, only one thing that I didn't like, which is reflects back on something you already know. And had she not done that, I would have loved this book. But the main character is sort of thinking through the clues and refreshing them in her mind and trying to look at them to see whether she can get a different angle on them. And we don't have to do that thinking with her. It's fine if the author were to say, oh, she was thinking about such and such a clue in such and such a garage and something didn't seem right. She doesn't have to go through the whole picture. She just can say she was thinking about that car in the garage and thought, but there weren't any air in the tires. That kind of thing? Yeah. So there's too much back thinking, and that was my only problem. I think if that had been taken out, this would have been just really, really tight story. It's her first book. I think it was published before the prequel. In fact, I think the prequel came quite a bit after. People were going, well, like, what's her backstory? It's kind of interesting. So currently this series sits at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 books, and it was originally published in 2016. I bought this book at the La Have bookstore that I showed you about on my Lighthouse tour, which is possibly we're going to stop in there on our way to Steve's birthday trip, which I'll tell you about in a sec. Anyways, I am going to call them and see if they've got book number 2, because I think it's worth going forward. It's a small enough quibble and well enough done elsewhere that it's much better than some of these other mysteries that I've moaned and complained about. The second book I read here is every summer I try to do another one in the Tony Hillerman series, and this is book 9. We've got Talking God, which is a Leap Horn and Chi novel. So this is taking place down in oh my God, Arizona, New Mexico. How can I not know that? I've been reading 9 books. Anyways, this one takes place in Washington. And what's happened is someone has been murdered on a train and their body has been left beside the tracks. And that's how Joe Leaphorn comes into it. He has... they can't identify the person, and this bugs him. He's the kind of guy who just doesn't like to leave things unsolved. So he's got his journey line and ends up in Washington to meet 1 or 2 people that might help with some clues. And so he's putting the puzzle together on his trajectory. Now, Jim Chi is friends with a woman called Janet Pete, and I think both of them would ultimately like to get romantically involved, but they've got other things happening that they just don't want to go there. So they're friends. And she has this client that, through a series of weird coincidences, Jim Chi had arrested in his hometown, in whatever state it is, I don't remember. And he is asked by Janet Pete to come to Washington because she thinks something's going on. She thinks she's being manipulated. She's asked to represent this client who had been arrested by Jim Chi. He's under, I'm not sure what that word is. He's pending a court case on certain charges of evading arrest, but he's got some other things that have to do with the degrading of bones, and it all has to do with archaeology and returning First Nations bones to proper ancestral grounds. And so we get to see a little bit behind the scenes of the museum, because the museum is involved, about what are the 2 sides of the coin, about, you know, who has right to these bones, and what if they don't have a known site where they had been digged up. Not every person's body in those days had an official graveyard, and not every tribe had a graveyard, like burial grounds and so on. Different tribes, different burial practices. So not every body can be assumed to be up for grabs as far as First Nations are concerned. You know, it's like not just some random person on a hiking trail. This probably was some of our ancestors. That's their side, the coin, and we'd like them back. And it doesn't matter that we don't have a graveyard to repatriate them to. We'll figure that out when we get their bones back. The other side of the coin is, no, we need it for research, we can't use plaster casts, that's not authentic. And then, you know, anyways, the museums have got their vested side of the coin. And if you've been at the blah, that's the background. I don't need to go any further. So Jim Chi ends up in Washington, and at a certain cultural event, they bump into each other, and it's like they realize they're more or less on the same circle of the mystery, that this client of Janet Pete's is connected to the death of Leaphorn's corpse, and Leaphorn's corpse was on the search for the fellow that Jim Chi had arrested because they were going to meet back there. So it's a very interesting little circle. It does, as Leaphorn says a number of times, there's no such thing as coincidences. And what the author does is create this storyline that there appear to be a lot of coincidences, but it actually is very logical and very interestingly solved. There's a lot. I think there's a fair amount of tension. There's a little bit of stuff where we are not party to, but not too much. Every once in a while, you know, someone will get a phone call and they'll go, oh, yeah, and leave the room. And then the next step of the mystery is solved. But that gets revealed. So I love this. Every summer I get a different one in the series. As I say, I'm on number 9. And I'm not sure how many there are, because one of the things the book printer does is doesn't put them in chronological order. I don't know why, and then puts in a couple of children's books. So that's very interesting and actually pretty annoying. And I think nowhere on the cover does it tell you which book this is in the series. I don't think they stand alone. This one stands alone better than the others because it's taking place in Washington. But if you don't know why Leaphorn is on his own and why Jim Chi is kind of at loose ends, like their whole backstory is just missing, and I think their backstory helps. Doesn't assist with the mystery, but it just helps with the characters. All right, the next one I read, and I do not remember what made me pick this up because I generally don't get the Pulitzer Prize winners, but this is Colson Whitehead writing The Underground Railroad. I do remember someone saying to me this was pretty amazing, but I don't remember putting the two thoughts together when I did the buying. This was also on my tour of bookstores across the Lighthouse route, and I don't at the top of my head remember which bookstore I bought it in. So this is a pretty interesting story. We've got a sort of fantastical supposition that if you stop and think about the practicalities, you're going to not love the book. Don't go there. There's an underground actual railroad with rails and station stops and tunnels, and no, we don't know how oxygen is maintained when there's steam going, and we don't know where the steam goes when it's traveling through. Let it go. I had to let it go. Each station along the way is built by different helpers, and some of them are Black Americans who have dug something along the way. It's primarily been dug by escaped slaves and the escaped enslaved and helpers and so on. So it's not a government project. Don't ask yourself, where does all that dirt go? Another question not to ask. So they range quite a bit in terms of size and like some of them have got water pumped down to them and food is available and so on, and others of them are just a hole to the railway and that's it. So the train comes through every so often. There's scheduled stops, and people get on board and get to different destinations. When you get on, you do not know where your destination is going to be. It's one of those things where only the beginning of this station and that end of that station, that's all you know as the driver and as the passenger. You get to the next station, it's going to take you where it's going to take you. And there's lots of branches and side tracks and stuff, so it's a maze underground, and it crosses U.S. It's it's all the way as far as Indiana. Now there's some states where they've managed to close it down because they've been absolutely insane about shutting down any kind of facilitation of getting the enslaved out. So North Carolina does not stand up very well in this story. Really, really, really doesn't. So Cora is a Black American, and she has been enslaved as the granddaughter of someone who had been brought over from Africa. And so we see her story. She's on a really miserable plantation. The owner and the overseers and so on, they're just shitty, and it's pretty dire. So something crops up. She decides to go, and she's going with another fellow called Caesar, and then a third person joins who really shouldn't and actually kind of causes a lot of trouble as a result. They manage to get only so far. Things go wrong. Things go right. Things go wrong. Things seem to be going pretty good in South Carolina. They get to South Carolina. That's not too much of a spoiler because we know she travels the Underground Railroad. So we just, on the back, it just doesn't tell you where you get to. Everywhere she goes, one of the things that Cora is very curious about is what is the world like outside of the plantation. I mean, we're seeing the terrible side of enslavement in terms of the cruelties and the laws that support enslavement and so on. We're seeing that dark side, but we're also seeing the curiosity of Cora as she becomes more aware, more educated. She has she has both the capacity and the opportunity to learn how to read, and she keeps on going with that. And as a result, she becomes more and more it's not so much thoughtful, but more complex in her thinking, and she's able to add in information, and so her worldview and expands, and doesn't necessarily add to her compassion, but I think she might get a little more angry as time goes by. But anyhow, she eventually things ensue. If I tell you anything more about that, then it's going to be spoilers. We come to Cora at the end of a really difficult several years of trying to escape, and it's a bit of a cliffhanger, and I'm okay with that, because that's Cora's. I guess somewhere along the line we encounter the idea that everybody's meant to be on this earth for some kind of something, and we don't. It's not divine stuff. It's just that everybody has some kind of a purpose that they contribute, good or bad, to the world around them. And Cora seems to be one of observation and one of travel and of thinking, merging these different kinds of experiences and communities and human behavior. And so because she sort of becomes the little voice inside, in a way, like at a meta level. She's not actually telling us how to think, or she's not necessarily delivering a message, but she's just observing the way some people opt into kindness and other people don't. But she's not necessarily making judgments about it. So it's neutral in that regard. I really liked it. I found some of the parts pretty grisly. I'm not your grisly kind of gal. There was some pretty tough spots. So if you, yeah, but you know that it's a tough spot, and you know that there's blood and a bit of gore, but we don't dwell on it. Thank God, we don't see the flies and the maggots. Well, I would recommend this, absolutely. It's probably one of the few Pulitzer Prize winners that I would say I'm so glad I read. And I'm wondering, I'm beginning to think that the type of book that is winning the prizes might be changing. They might not be the kinds of books that only 4 people in the world understand. I think we're now getting into a phase of books that has a message, has excellent writing, has a plot that the reader can actually sit with for a long period of time. Some books, you just, where's the plot, or where's the character? They're just too much of a literary trick. So this is not a literary trick. I think, let me try to see now. Just checking to see whether, yes, he's also, he's written a number of prizes, but I don't know if it's just for this book or whether he's written other things. That's not immediately clear. Coming soon is Harlem Shuffle, a gloriously entertaining novel of heists, shakedowns, and rip-offs set in Harlem in the 60s. Well, that ought to be good if this is very well researched, but at the same time, he's taken a leap of fantasy by having this underground railroad and certain kinds of stations along the way. He's really played with the whole idea of the train and schedules and station masters, and then the trauma of trying to get to a station, and what if you don't make it, and how much at risk the people are who are helping the enslaved. So Cora's story is she's the device that tells multiple stories. There are 1 or 2 chapters where we bump into characters that are mostly not seen, like Cora's mother Mabel. We do eventually see a chapter on her, although she only pictures in the story as someone who Cora's pretty pissed off with, because her mother left and escaped and left Cora behind. So anyways, yeah, 100% recommend it. It's like 5 out of 5 for me. Actually, yeah, well, the first mystery, maybe not so much a 5, but pretty strong 4. The book I am currently reading and have been meaning to read for bazillion years is The Birds Rained Down. This is by Jocelyn Saucier, was translated from the French, Quebec French, Rhonda Mullins, and this one was the 2015 Selection Canada Reads. I don't think it won, but it was selected. It's about 155 pages. I'll be done by tonight. And oh my goodness, it's so beautifully printed. It's got this nice paper that's got a little bit of tooth to it. It's got the cream background so it doesn't shine at you. It's got a very nice font size. So just as a reading experience, it's a lovely book. I'm a little worried that the spine might crack. I hear a teeny bit of cracking going on, but we've got deep in North Ontario forest live Tom and Charlie, two octogenarians, which I forgot means 80-year-olds. I was going octogenarians with stop signs. Determined to live out the rest of their lives on their own terms, free of all ties and responsibilities. Their only connection to civilization, two pot farmers, like marijuana, who bring them whatever they can't eke out for themselves. But their solitude is disrupted by the arrival of two women. The first is a photographer searching for survivors of a series of catastrophic fires nearly a century earlier, and the second is an elderly escapee from a psychiatric institution. The little hideaway in the woods will never be the same. I'm loving it. It's so beautifully written. The sentences are all tight. There's beautiful description of nature. There's a very lovely description of how these Tom and Charlie and the person who was survived the fire from way back. They're all living together at a certain point in time, in the fairly adjacent to each other in the woods. So they've known each other for years and years. So we're getting to see their stories in a really interesting kind of a way. It's sort of it reminds me a little bit of what I was saying earlier about small towns, where you gradually grow into a story. People will just drop a line and say, "Oh, you remember the time his boat sank?" And you're like, "Boat sank?" And they go, "Oh yeah, that's an old story." And then 2 months later you'll actually get the story. So and now there's a mosquito flying around my boobs. So similar kind of a way where you're drinking coffee and learning your stories. That's how this transpires, that these guys around a poker game or around a cup of coffee will let things out. Over the course of a 5-hour poker game, eventually you just get to know some pretty interesting stuff. So I'm only halfway, not even, and I was just based on what I have read in these first 40 pages, completely recommend. I'll just sum it up in the next time I have a video, but that will be next week sometime if all goes well. So what's happening? We on Sunday will go into Liverpool. That's Steve's birthday, and we are going to start with lunch at it's a restaurant that's been sold, so it's not called the Ploughman's Lunch, but maybe it's called the Ploughman's Stop or something. Anyways, you can now make reservations, so we're going to hopefully stop and have a lunch there and go on into Liverpool. Where is that? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's just an old general store that's being reclaimed. It's lovely. I don't know why people aren't more imaginative about these things. That's a side rant. We just went into the general store here in town, which used to be one of the reasons we moved here, is because we could get milk and we could get your basics. If we ran out of cat food or something, we could just get your basics. But now it's all just little soaps and candles. And anyways, this one where the Ploughman's place is, it has turned it into a bakery on one side and then sort of a restaurant on the back end of it, and it's got a great patio. So we're going to go for a lunch and then head into Lunenburg, not Liverpool, Lunenburg. Get to the two bookstores that we really like. There's a coffee shop Steve really likes, and there might be some music because it's the folk festival going on at that time. So we will, I think, catch a performance, or half of a performance at one of the grandstands. and then head home. Now, I don't know whether we'll hit the La Have bookstore or not. Maybe that'll be another trip, I'm not sure. Depends. And also, we have no idea what the weather's going to be like. It says today that it's sunny. Yes, it's sunny and cool. It's practically a gale as far as the wind goes. It's just, as I've been talking to you, I've seen a tea towel and a beach towel go flying away. And there's a couple of other things that they're on their journey out towards the road. I'll have to go get them. So I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true. I will see you next time. I have no idea how well this will upload. There won't be any editing. It's just camp time. So we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.